It's a tale as old as time, when a young man is bequeathed the power of the last magician to save the world from darkness and restore balance to the universe. We're going to talk about it right here in our review of The Last Magician, Volume 1 from Marcosia Enterprises. See you in 3. And welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of The Last Magician, Volume 1 from Marcosia Enterprises. This volume is a tale that regales readers with the story of a young man descended to become the last magic wielder who restores balance to the world. But before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notification. Your attention is greatly appreciated, and stay tuned to the end for the score. Credits. The Last Magician Volume 1 is written by Sean Megan, art by Thean Uncage, letters by Micah Myers, and Thean Uncage also did the cover art as well. And this book comes to us from Marcosia Enterprises, who's a very small publisher that we've occasionally reviewed in the past, and generally speaking, they come up with good stuff, and this particular volume is no exception. The story from Sean Megan centers around a boy by the name of Chris Keystone. And what's happened is Chris's father was a detective in the town of Rookwood. And what happened is that his father is secretly a very powerful magician who defeats demons, deals with all kinds of magical threats, and he protects the physical world from incursions by what they call, quote unquote, the other side, a sort of in-between limbo where people have passed on but not gone on to whatever final destination they've gone to, or that realm is also populated by demons and shadow figures and all kinds of supernatural creatures. Chris's father is killed in the line of duty, we think. We never actually see the death occur. And Chris is sort of left with his mother and sort of to figure out his path in life. 5 years later, we jump forward, and Chris now is feeling the pull, a magical pull, trying to guide him to whatever destiny awaits him. And eventually, he is drawn with his friends Jetta and Jackson to this mausoleum in a cemetery that no one's ever seen before. That sort of pops up, and Chris enters it, and he is bestowed this magical power of a magician. And then he's visited by the ghost of his father. His father explains to him, we come from a long line of magicians, and there's a prophecy that there will be a last magician. My boy, you are the last magician. And the last magician is the one who is going to rid the world of darkness and provide balance between the physical world and the other side, the quote unquote, the other side, and bring it all together in a state of harmony. But you've got to learn how to use your powers, which take the form of gauntlets that appear on Chris's hands, and he's got to deal with demonic threats, shadowy figures, all kinds of curses and dark supernatural forces that will come against him in the days to come. The first big task that comes up against him is this large group of shadow demons that attack him outright. He's able to learn enough of the magic from a grimoire that his father left him to cast bolts of energy, to create shields, to do all the magical, powerful things that you could possibly imagine. He can teleport, he can levitate, he can move things, all the different magical types of developments that you can think of, he can do with just with essentially no limitation other than his imagination. When the shadow demons attack him directly and that sort of fails to get the job done, they now attack him indirectly through his friends Jackson and Jetta. Eventually, one of them gets to Jetta and possesses her. And now Chris has this extra layer of conflict that he has to work through of how do I destroy these demons but also save my friend at the same time. We learn through his uncle, who is his father's partner for many, many years, 20 in fact, who's going to help him to kind of figure out where these shadow demons come from. There's a master, somebody who is summoning them, wink, wink. You can pretty much figure out right from the first page who that is. And then once he figures out, okay, now I have to destroy the shadow demons and whittle down their numbers because they're only strong basically in packs. I can weaken them enough and then I can free my friend who's been possessed, this girl named Jetta, who Chris now has to secretly acknowledge that he's in love with. he goes through all that trouble and turmoil, and it comes to find out, which big surprise, once he defeats that group of shadow demons to weaken them, that there's a much larger group that's right behind it, and somebody's summoning them. And of course, shocker, shocker, surprise, surprise, the person who killed his father and is summoning the shadow demons because he wants the power for himself is his uncle, Mayor Locke. Not a surprise at all, because you pretty much saw it from the first page. Still, his uncle gets him into a hostage situation and says, I've waited 20 years or 25 years at this point to become a magician because I never had the power. I know better than anybody, and I want to rule the world. Magic on you is wasted. I want your power. And he comes up with this plan to take Chris's power and infuse himself with it, making him into, quote unquote, Warlock, the Dark Lord of Magic. So, telegraph from a mile away. That's just the way it is. And then Chris manages to defeat his his uncle, I should say, now deemed himself the Warlock, by using spells that his uncle never knew to disable his power, to curse him, and then save his friends. And then all is right with the world until we come to whichever volume happens to be coming up next. That's the long and the short of it. Now, if you're wondering, okay, well, a lot of this sounds very familiar, or at least has some common elements to it. They do, but we're going to talk about it in the what we like and didn't like sections, because I want to kind of piece through that a little bit. It's not exactly like anything you've ever read before, but it's very familiar to things you've read before. So what do we like about The Last Magician Volume 1 from Marcosia Enterprises? Lots of great character chemistry between Chris and his friends, Jackson and Jetta. The battles are big and plentiful and not at all small or short. So if you want big magical action with lots of cool whiz pop bang stuff to kind of grab your attention, you get plenty of it in this volume. There is a lot of action in this volume, a lot of magical battle type action in this volume. So if you want, there's nothing timid about the energy in here. So Sean, Megan, and Theonon Cage, they really went for it as far as when it's time to fight, the fight is on and it goes. And it's big and it's powerful and energetic and exciting. Plus, the story development follows that classical heroes trope of a hero who's been summoned to fulfill a prophecy, and even though he doesn't quite reject it, he kind of goes along with it, but he's timid at first, but he really gets into his groove, and you really see Chris start to accept his role as destiny has laid it out for him. So a lot of good stuff in there as far as a good classic heroes story. What didn't we like about The Last Magician Volume 1? Couple things. First, there's a lot of dialogue in this volume. Now, it's a volume, so it's a graphic novel, which is about 160 plus pages. So it's not a short story. I mean, this is a collection of issues if those were broken up into a classic comic book. So it's a graphic novel, and a fairly decent sized one. But you get a lot of dialogue scenes that, honestly, there are some parts we just sort of skim through. We eventually went back and read it, but some of the dialogue just goes on. You don't get walls of text, but some of the scenes are just a little too long and in some cases unnecessary. Definitely could have tightened up on some of the dialogue scenes, especially between Chris and his friends, where they're just sort of chit-chatting to develop their chemistry and and give the reader a sense of what the relationship is like. But it didn't need to be. Some of them didn't need to be there at all, and some of the few ones that were there that kind of gave you a sense of the understanding of the relationship just dragged on, especially with Jackson. Jackson's there, but he really doesn't do much. You could almost take him out of the whole story, and that would tighten it up a lot. So he provides some comic relief. He provides some camaraderie, but Jackson really takes up more space than necessary, and you definitely could have tightened this up a little bit by either shortening his role or taking him out altogether. The second piece that's a little bit of a downer, not too much, but a little bit of a downer is, yes, this feels very familiar. It's not exactly like any story you've ever read before, but it's almost like every story you've ever read before about a kid who gets magical powers and he has to rise to the occasion to beat the bad guy. And so even though it's executed very well, it feels almost tropey or cliche in some spots. And, if you've had a lot of experience reading literature and stories and graphic novels, and we're all constant readers here, so you get that, this is almost going to feel like, oh, been there, done that. And the uniqueness or the specialness of this volume is kind of a little bit lacking. It feels like every story that you've ever read of this sort. The third thing that's probably the biggest downer of all is you could see that the uncle was the bad guy from page one. It's part of it was the design. You made him look evil. And then the little side glances and the looks and the smirks and the way his hair looks and everything. You could see he was a bad guy from a mile away. So any kind of um, not bait and switch, but any kind of surprise about who was the master and what did the master intend, just from the nature of Chris's story and his background with his father and what happened to his father and where he fits in the prophecy and his uncle's place in that realm. It was telegraphed right from the get-go, and there was just no surprise in it when it was finally revealed that he was the main villain. So that was kind of a bummer. What about the art? Let's talk about the art from Theon Cage. Like I said, you get a lot of big, lengthy, magical fights that are not short on spectacle. And Theon Cage deserves all the credit for that because it's generally well crafted. You can see Chris learning how to master his powers through each fight, and the fight doesn't feel like it's a foregone conclusion. You definitely see Chris getting in trouble. You feel like he could be maybe not killed because that would then that would be the end of the story, but at least damaged or hurt in a serious way. So big action, big magical displays, lots of spectacle, lots of wow and pop factor, which is exactly what you want in a story where the kid has to fight with magic. So it works like a kid would imagine having superpowers would work in a magical context. Final thoughts. What do we think about The Last Magician Volume 1 from Marcosia Enterprises? Solid hero story, good chemistry between the characters, lots of big magical action, good solid art, and generally speaking, it was an entertaining and engaging story. On the downside, there are too many dialogue scenes that went on way too long that didn't need to be there. And the uncle's place in the story was telegraphed from a mile away, so there was really no surprise about who the main villain was. So overall, good job. So therefore, we're going to give The Last Magician Volume 1 from Marcosia Enterprises a solid 8 out of 10. I think that's a fair score. That's a fair score. So I hope you like it. And do you like fantasy graphic novels of this sort? Do you like that classic hero's journey? And do you like big magical battles? Let us know what you think in the comment section down below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and please stay tuned through the outro for our next review.